The unforgettable encounter. It was just another ordinary afternoon when Jason decided to walk home from school. He had always been a quiet, reserved kid, never one to seek attention. School was just a place where he went to learn and get through the day. But this afternoon felt different. The air was warm, with a hint of autumn in it. Leaves rustled on the trees, and the sun dipped low in the sky, casting a soft glow over everything. It seemed like a peaceful day, just like any other. Little did Jason know that today, everything was about to change. As he walked down the familiar street, carrying a bag of candy he had bought from the corner shop, Jason's thoughts wandered. He was thinking about the history test he had just taken. He wasn't worried about his grade. He had studied hard. But his mind kept drifting, distracted by the events of the day. The walk home was usually peaceful and quiet, but as he passed by a small park, something caught his attention. A girl stood in the park, standing still as if waiting for something or someone. She had long, dark hair that shimmered in the sunlight, and her clothes were simple but elegant, like nothing Jason had seen before. What struck him the most were her eyes. They were large, deep, and they seemed to glow faintly, as if they held the secrets of the universe inside them. She was staring right at him, and it felt as though she could see straight into his soul. For a moment, Jason stopped in his tracks, unsure whether he should keep walking or stop and say something. He had never seen her before. She didn't look like anyone from his school or neighborhood. In fact, there was something about her that felt different, almost otherworldly. Jason shook his head, telling himself it was just his imagination playing tricks on him. After all, who could blame him for being distracted? It had been a long day. But there was something about this girl that made it impossible to just walk past her. Jason felt an inexplicable pull to her, something beyond mere curiosity. He nervously fumbled with the bag of candy in his hand. Jason had always been a kind-hearted person, always willing to help someone in need. Maybe this was his chance to be nice, to reach out to someone who seemed to be alone. Without thinking much about it, he walked over to her and offered her the bag of candy with a shy smile. Hey, want some candy?" he asked awkwardly. The girl blinked, and for a moment, Jason wasn't sure if she had heard him. Her eyes lingered on the bag, then met his once more. A small smile appeared on her lips, one that was both warm and mysterious. She stepped forward, reaching out with delicate hands, and took the candy from him without a word. Jason watched as she slowly unwrapped a piece and popped it into her mouth. The moment their hands touched, Jason felt a strange shiver run down his spine. It wasn't fear, but something else. Something powerful. He couldn't explain it, but he felt a deep connection with her, like he had known her forever, even though they had never met before. "Thank you," she finally spoke, her voice soft and melodic. Her accent was unlike anything Jason had ever heard before, and it made her words sound like a song. "You are kind," she added, looking directly at him. Jason felt his face flush, unsure of how to respond. "No problem," Jason replied, his voice barely above a whisper. He had never been good with words, especially not with strangers. But there was something about this girl that made him feel both nervous and calm at the same time. It was as if her presence was both comforting and unsettling. She didn't say anything else. She just looked at him with those deep, knowing eyes. Jason stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do next. Should he keep talking, or should he just walk away? Before he could make up his mind, the girl smiled again, this time more brightly. There was something almost ethereal about her smile, something that made her look otherworldly. "Goodbye," she said simply, before turning and walking away, her steps light and graceful, like she was gliding over the ground. Jason stood there, watching her retreating figure. His mind raced with questions. Who was she? Where had she come from? And why did she seem so familiar, even though he knew he had never seen her before? His heart beat faster as he tried to make sense of the encounter. There was no logical explanation for it, but something about the moment felt important. He shook his head, trying to shake off the feeling that lingered in the air. Maybe it was just a coincidence, he told himself. Maybe she was just a girl passing through the neighborhood. But no matter how hard he tried to convince himself, he couldn't ignore the feeling that this was not the last time he would see her. As he continued walking home, the candy bag in his hand felt heavier than before. Jason couldn't help but glance back at the park one last time. The girl was gone, but her presence was still with him, lingering in the back of his mind. And as he turned the corner to his house, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. It was an unforgettable encounter, one that would change Jason's life forever. A life changed forever. Years passed, and Jason's life seemed to fall back into its usual routine. The memory of the girl with the strange eyes slowly faded into the background of his mind, like a forgotten dream. Yet there was always something about that moment that stayed with him. The feeling, the shiver, the sense that something important had happened. He couldn't quite shake it off. But life goes on, right? School, friends, and family became his focus, and the mysterious encounter with the girl turned into nothing more than a fleeting memory. Until one ordinary evening when everything changed. Jason was sitting at home, flipping through channels on the TV, bored. The world outside seemed just as quiet as usual, with the sounds of his neighbors and the distant hum of cars passing by. It was the kind of evening that felt like nothing would ever happen, just like every other. But as he surfed through the news channels, something caught his eye. A breaking news story appeared on the screen, flashing in bold, urgent letters. Mysterious alien invasion begins. Is Earth ready? Jason's heart skipped a beat. He leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. It was just another sensational headline, he thought. But then, the news anchor began to describe the alien invasion. And as the footage played, Jason's breath caught in his throat. The images were incredible. Massive ships descending from the sky, strange energy beams lighting up the atmosphere. And her, the girl. There she was again, standing tall in front of the alien ships, wearing a uniform like no human had ever worn before. She was no longer the same girl he had met all those years ago. Her eyes, that same glowing intensity, now looked even more powerful, more commanding. She had grown, and she was different, but it was definitely her. Jason's hands trembled as he reached for the remote control, pausing the news coverage. There on his TV screen was the girl he'd met only once, now a leader, standing at the heart of an invasion. The shock hit him like a punch to the gut. This couldn't be real, could it? Was he imagining things, or had she truly been an alien from another world? His mind raced, trying to piece together what he was seeing. He remembered the moment they met, the way she looked at him with such intensity. That strange sense of connection he had felt back then suddenly seemed so much more significant now. Could this be some kind of sign? Could she have been a part of something much bigger than him? Jason's pulse quickened as the news anchor continued speaking. The alien forces, led by a mysterious figure known as Ilara, have begun to take control of key military locations. Experts are still trying to understand the true purpose behind their invasion. But one thing is clear, these aliens are unlike anything Earth has ever seen. Jason couldn't tear his eyes away from the screen. Ilara. That was the name the newscaster had used. Was it possible that this was the same girl who had taken candy from him years ago? And if so, why had she come back? What was her mission? And more importantly, why was he, of all people, so connected to her? He couldn't stop thinking about her. Her eyes, those intense, almost hypnotic eyes that seemed to look straight through him, into his very soul. It was as if she had always known something about him that he hadn't understood at the time. Jason felt both terrified and intrigued. He had no answers, only more questions, but one thing was certain. His life would never be the same. Days turned into weeks, and Jason found himself obsessed with the news stories about the invasion. He followed every report, every update, trying to find out more about Ilara and what she was planning. But no matter how much he searched, There were only fragmented pieces of information. Some said she was a leader of an alien species seeking peace, while others claimed she had come to conquer. No one seemed to know for sure. Jason began to notice strange things happening around him. He would catch glimpses of people watching him, their eyes filled with curiosity, like they knew something he didn't. Was he being watched? Was someone else aware of his connection to Ilara? He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than he was being told. One night, as Jason sat in his room, scrolling through the latest news on his laptop, a sudden knock on the door made him jump. He hesitated, wondering who it could be. The house was quiet, and he hadn't been expecting anyone. He opened the door cautiously, his heart racing in his chest. There, standing in the doorway, was Ilara. Her presence was like a force of nature, filling the small space with an overwhelming energy. She was taller now, stronger, and wore an outfit that looked like something out of a sci-fi movie, sleek, metallic, and otherworldly. But it was her eyes that still held him captive, those same eyes that had looked at him all those years ago with a mysterious knowing. "Do you recognize me, human?" she asked, her voice calm, yet full of authority. Jason felt the ground shift beneath him. The girl who had once taken candy from him was now standing at his doorstep, and everything he thought he knew about his life suddenly felt insignificant. The world he had known was no longer the same. It was as if the entire universe had shifted, and he had been dragged along for the ride. Ilara's gaze never left him as she stepped forward, her eyes intense, almost searching. "I've come for you, Jason," she said softly, her voice carrying a weight of meaning he couldn't understand. Jason's breath caught in his throat. He had no idea what she wanted or what was coming next, but he knew one thing for sure: his life was about to change forever. The mysterious visit. Jason stood frozen at the doorstep, his mind spinning. Ilara. It was really her, the same girl from all those years ago, the girl with the glowing eyes. But this was no longer this shy, mysterious stranger from the park. This woman, this alien, was someone entirely different. Her presence was overwhelming, as though she radiated power, strength, and something far beyond human understanding. Jason's heart hammered in his chest as his mind raced. Why was she here? What did she want from him? Ilara's eyes never wavered from his, and for a moment, Jason felt as if he were caught in some sort of invisible web. He had no idea how to react. His body felt paralyzed, as if his very existence depended on the next words she would speak. "I know you must have many questions," Ilara said softly, her voice smooth like silk, but with an undeniable strength behind it. "But I don't have much time." Jason swallowed hard. He couldn't believe what was happening. How did you find me?" he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "I've been watching you," she replied, a small, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. "Ever since that day, you've been important, more important than you know." Jason's mind raced, watching him. Important. All he had done was offer her a piece of candy on a quiet afternoon. That was the only connection they had. Was she telling the truth? Was it possible that such a small, innocent gesture had led to something far bigger? He opened his mouth to speak, but Ilara held up a hand, silencing him gently. "I need you, Jason," she said, her tone growing more serious. "The world you know, your world, is about to change, and I need your help to stop what's coming." Jason took a step back, his pulse quickening. "What do you mean? What's coming?" Ilara's gaze hardened for a moment, her eyes flickering with a mix of sadness and determination. "The war has already begun. My people, the Valerians, are engaged in a battle that spans across the stars. But we cannot win this war alone. And you, Jason, are the key to turning the tide." Jason's mind couldn't keep up with what she was saying. This was crazy. It sounded like something straight out of a science fiction movie, not real life. "I'm not a soldier," he muttered, his voice shaking. "I'm just a regular guy. I don't even know what you're talking about." Ilara stepped closer, her presence filling the space between them. Jason instinctively took another step back, but there was no fear in her eyes, only resolve. "Your kindness, Jason, is what made you special," she explained. "It's not your strength or your skills that matter. It's your heart. The moment you gave me that candy, I knew you were someone who understood the value of compassion. And that's what I need." Jason's confusion deepened. "Compassion. You're saying that's all it takes to save the galaxy?" Ilara's eyes softened slightly, as if she were searching for the right words. "It's more than that. In the universe, there is a force far more powerful than any weapon or technology. It's the force of human kindness, the ability to connect, to heal, to fight for what's right. The Valerians are a proud and noble people, but we have forgotten the strength that compassion brings. And that's where you come in." Jason shook his head, still struggling to comprehend. "Why me? Why not someone else?" Ilara stepped forward, her voice lowering, growing more intense. "Because you, Jason, are different. You've always been different. That day when you gave me the candy, you unknowingly forged a bond that connects you to me and to the future of my people. You are part of something bigger than yourself, something you can't yet fully understand. But you will." Jason's breath caught in his throat. The weight of her words hung in the air like a heavy fog. He had always considered himself an ordinary person. How could he be part of something this massive? How could something so small, a simple act of kindness, have led to this moment? He couldn't wrap his mind around it. Ilara seemed to sense his disbelief. She reached into her coat and pulled out a small glowing device that hummed with a soft, otherworldly energy. She held it out to him. "This is the key to everything," she said. "It will help you understand what's at stake. But once you take it, there's no turning back. Your life will change forever. And you will be forced to choose. Will you help me, or will you walk away?" Jason stared at the device. It looked like nothing he had ever seen before. Sleek, crystalline, and pulsing with an inner light. It beckoned him, but at the same time, fear gripped his heart. What would happen if he took it? What did she mean by no turning back? He looked up at Ilara, her eyes locked onto his. There was no hint of deception in her gaze, only the raw, unfiltered truth. And deep down, Jason knew she wasn't lying. There was something real here, something bigger than him, something that had been set in motion long before he had even realized it. For a moment, Jason hesitated. But then the memory of that day, the day when he gave her candy, came rushing back. The strange connection he had felt, the unspoken bond that had lingered in the back of his mind for all these years. It all made sense now. Maybe this was his purpose. Maybe he was meant to do this. With a deep breath, Jason took the device from Ilara's outstretched hand. As his fingers closed around it, a rush of energy surged through his body, filling him with an overwhelming sense of clarity. It was as if everything had shifted, as if he could see the world for what it truly was. Ilara's gaze softened, and she gave him a nod of approval. "Thank you, Jason. Now we begin." Jason's heart pounded in his chest as he looked at the device in his hand. There was no going back now. His life, the life he had known, was over. But in its place, something far greater was beginning. A journey that would take him to the stars, to a battle for the future of Earth and beyond. And it all started with a single choice. The truth revealed. The silence that followed Jason's decision was deafening. He could feel the weight of the glowing device in his hand, the soft pulse of energy thrumming against his skin. It felt alive, like a part of something larger. He looked up at Ilara, who had taken a step back to give him space. Her eyes, which had always held an air of mystery, now seemed to shimmer with approval, as though she had known from the start that he would make the right choice. "Thank you, Jason," Ilara said softly, her voice full of emotion. "Now, there are things you must understand. The truth is far greater than you could ever imagine." Jason swallowed hard. Every part of him screamed for answers. His mind was a blur of confusion, trying to process everything that had happened so far. What is this? What is going on? What's the truth? Ilara's gaze hardened slightly, but there was a tenderness there too. You were chosen long before you even met me. Your kindness, your ability to connect with others, is rare among humans. It's something my people, my species, need if we are to survive. Jason felt a knot tighten in his stomach. What do you mean? I'm just a guy who gave you some candy. Ilara smiled, but it was a knowing smile. That candy you offered me that day wasn't just an act of kindness. It was a signal that you were the one we were waiting for. You see, Jason, my people, the Valerians, are not like the other alien species you may have heard about. We are not conquerors, but we are a dying race. Jason's heart raced. A dying race. The word felt heavy, as though it carried the weight of entire civilizations, of histories that were lost and forgotten. But how could I possibly help you? I don't know anything about saving a race. Ilara's eyes softened, and for the first time, Jason saw a flicker of vulnerability in her expression. You don't have to understand everything yet. You will. But first, you must know this. The Valerians were once a powerful, peaceful race. We thrived across the stars. But then, a darkness came. A force so destructive, so brutal, that it tore through our world. It destroyed our cities, our people, our way of life. Jason felt the weight of her words as if they were sinking into his chest. What is this force? Who did this to you? Ilara hesitated for a moment, the pain of the memory flickering behind her eyes. It's called the Attractions. They are a ruthless species who seek only destruction. They live to conquer and obliterate everything in their path. They were once a small, isolated force, but now they've grown stronger. Their armies are vast, and their cruelty is unmatched. They wiped out my planet, and now they're moving across the galaxy, conquering world after world. Earth is next. Jason's throat went dry. Earth was next. He had heard about the alien invasion, but it had always seemed distant, something out of a movie. Now, it was real, and it was coming for them. Coming for him. So, you want me to help you fight them? I don't know the first thing about fighting. I can't. I'm just a normal guy. Ilara placed a hand gently on his shoulder. You are not just a normal guy. Jason, what makes you special is your heart. You are what the Valerians lost. You are a symbol of hope, of compassion. We believe that kindness and understanding could win this war, not weapons or destruction. The Attractions don't understand that. They are consumed by hatred, by a desire to control. And it's that hatred that makes them weak. Jason's mind reeled. Could it really be that simple? Could kindness, something so pure and simple, really stand a chance against an army of merciless invaders? He wanted to believe it, but it was hard to grasp. But how do we stop them? Jason asked, his voice barely above a whisper. How do we win? Ilara's eyes darkened. We don't fight them in the way they expect. We fight them with unity, with compassion, and with the strength of the human spirit. You are not the only one who can help. There are others, humans who share the same capacity for empathy, for goodness. We need to unite them, unite the forces of Earth, the ones who will stand with us, not just to fight, but to bring hope. Jason felt a flicker of something deep within him. Could it be possible that he was part of something so monumental? Was this why he had felt so drawn to Ilara? The connection wasn't random. It was a part of a larger plan. The idea seemed almost too much to believe, yet the way Ilara spoke, with such certainty and conviction, made him wonder if this was the truth he had been waiting for all along. Why me? Jason asked again, the question that had haunted him since the moment he first saw her. Why am I the one who can do this? Ilara's gaze softened, her voice barely above a whisper. Because you, Jason, are the first to truly understand. When you gave me that candy, you gave me something precious. Your trust, your kindness. And that kindness, that simple act, has the power to change the universe. The attractions may be strong, but they cannot fight what they don't understand. They cannot fight the heart of humanity. Jason's heart raced as he looked at Elara, finally beginning to understand the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just about saving his world. It was about saving the galaxy. And in that moment, he realized something he hadn't before. It wasn't about strength or weapons. It was about something deeper, something far more powerful. The strength of the human spirit. I'm ready, Jason said, his voice steady, though his heart was pounding in his chest. I'll help you. I'll help save Earth. I'll do whatever it takes. Elara smiled, a proud, almost relieved smile. I knew you would. And together, we'll begin the fight that will change everything. The fate of the universe depends on you, Jason. But you are not alone. You never were. As Elara's words sank in, Jason felt a surge of something. Hope, determination, and a sense of purpose. This was the beginning of something far bigger than himself. And no matter how impossible it seemed, he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't turn back now. An unexpected mission. Jason stood at the edge of the small, hidden base that Elara had led him to, the cool breeze brushing against his face. The sky above was a dull shade of gray, but something about the atmosphere felt charged. He couldn't put his finger on it, but there was an energy in the air, something larger than what he had known before. He felt like he was standing at the crossroads of a great journey, one that would lead him far beyond anything his life had ever prepared him for. Jason, Elara's voice broke through his thoughts. She had been silent for most of the journey, her expression unreadable, but now she stood beside him, her presence a calm anchor in the storm of his emotions. It's time. You have to decide. Jason turned to face her, his stomach a storm of uncertainty. Decide. Decide what? Her eyes were steady, focused, but there was something in them now. Something darker, more urgent. This mission, it's not just about fighting the attractions. It's about understanding what they are and what they've done. This mission, this choice, it's bigger than just you or me. You must choose whether you're willing to take the first step. Because once you do, there is no turning back. Jason felt the weight of her words, heavy and thick. What did she mean? What is the mission? What am I supposed to do? Elara took a deep breath and stepped forward, motioning for him to follow. We've been gathering information about the attractions for months. They've already infiltrated key positions across the globe. Their plan isn't just to destroy. It's far more insidious. They want to break humanity's spirit. If they succeed, Earth will fall, not by force, but by surrendering to fear. Jason's mind buzzed. Fear. That made sense. The world was already on edge with the rumors of alien invaders, the unknown, the uncertainty. People were scared. And fear, more than anything else, could break a person. But how does that fit with me? Jason asked, trying to wrap his mind around it. I'm just a guy. I'm not a leader. I'm not some soldier. What am I supposed to do? Elara stopped walking and turned to face him. The silence between them was thick, charged with an energy that was almost too much to bear. You are the key, Jason, not because you have some special power, but because you understand what it means to care. You have to go to their stronghold. You have to infiltrate their ranks and get close enough to uncover their true plans. We have reason to believe that they have a weapon that could tip the balance of power forever. But it's not just the weapon you need to find. It's their leader, Vrex. Jason's chest tightened at the name. Vrex? Who's that? Vrex is the one who masterminds the attraction war machine. He's cruel, ruthless, and his hunger for power is endless. But more than that, he's a force of manipulation. He knows how to twist hearts, to turn people against each other. We believe that if you can get close to him, learn his weaknesses, and expose the truth, you can break the attraction's hold over Earth. Jason stared at Elara, the reality of the task settling heavily on his shoulders. You want me to infiltrate their forces, get close to the most dangerous alien leader in history, and somehow stop him. Ilara nodded slowly. Yes, but you will not be alone. You will be given support from both Earth's forces and from my people. We will guide you, Jason, but the first step is yours alone. You have to be willing to risk everything. Because if you fail, if you let fear or doubt guide you, it won't just be your life at stake. It will be the future of every living being on this planet. The weight of her words landed like a punch in his gut. Jason's throat went dry. Could he really do this? Could he truly face this enemy, this war, knowing that his actions could determine the fate of an entire world? For the first time since meeting Ilara, Jason felt a deep pang of fear. Fear of failure, fear of the unknown, fear of the task ahead. His hands trembled as he looked at the device Ilara had given him, the one that had already begun to pulse with a soft, rhythmic energy, almost as if it were alive. It felt like a tether, pulling him toward something bigger than himself. But then, something else stirred deep within him, a quiet voice, a whisper, almost imperceptible. The same feeling he had when he first gave Ilara the candy all those years ago, a knowing, a deep sense of rightness. He had no training, no experience in war, no understanding of how to fight an alien army. But he knew what fear was. He knew what it meant to face something terrifying and still stand tall. This wasn't about being a soldier. It wasn't about strength or power. It was about standing up when the world tried to make you shrink back. It was about doing the right thing, even when it seemed impossible. Jason looked up at Ilara, his eyes filled with determination. I'm ready. I'll do it. Ilara's gaze softened, but there was still that fire in her eyes. She nodded slowly, a rare smile tugging at the corners of her lips. I knew you would. We'll begin your training immediately. You'll need all the preparation you can get. This won't be easy, but I have faith in you, Jason. You were chosen for a reason. Now, let's get to work. Jason took a deep breath, his heart steadying as he turned toward the path ahead. It wasn't just about saving the planet anymore. It was about proving to himself and to the world that even in the face of unimaginable odds, there was always hope. And that hope started with him. As Ilara led him toward the underground facility, Jason's mind was filled with a sense of purpose he had never known before. He had no idea what awaited him, but one thing was clear. This was only the beginning of a fight that would test everything he thought he knew about himself and about what it meant to truly be human. The battle begins. The days that followed Jason's decision were a blur of intense training and constant preparation. It felt like he had entered a new world, one where every step was measured, every decision carried weight. The quiet, normal life he once knew now felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. He was no longer just Jason, the shy, ordinary guy from Earth. He was something more now. He was a part of a much larger story, one that was unfolding with every passing hour. Ilara had taken him under her wing, guiding him through the basics of combat and strategy. She was relentless, pushing him past every limit he thought he had. At first, it was overwhelming. He struggled with the training, his body aching, and his mind racing to catch up with the alien techniques he was being taught. But as the days passed, something changed within him. The fear and uncertainty that had once gripped him slowly began to fade. It was replaced by a sharp, focused determination. He wasn't doing this just for himself anymore. He was fighting for the survival of Earth, for the chance to protect everything he had ever known. One evening, after a particularly brutal training session, Jason found himself alone on the edge of the base, staring out at the darkened horizon. The weight of the coming battle was heavy on his shoulders. The attractions were closing in. Earth was on the brink of devastation, and he was the one who had to make the difference. But how could someone like him, just a human, with no military experience, stand up against an entire alien war machine? He wasn't sure how to answer that. But he knew he had no choice. Ilara, Jason's voice broke the silence, his words carrying the weight of everything he had been feeling. What if we can't win? What if it's too much for us? Elara appeared beside him, her step silent as always. She didn't need to say anything. Her mere presence was a comfort, a reminder that he wasn't alone. "Jason," she said, her voice firm, "there are moments in every battle when doubt creeps in. But it's in those moments that we must find our strength. Fear can only control us if we let it. You have already shown more courage than most would ever have. This fight, it's not about victory alone. It's about standing up when the world is telling you to stay down." Jason nodded slowly, feeling the truth of her words settle deep within him. He had already made his choice. There was no turning back. As the weeks passed, Earth's resistance forces began to mobilize. Nations came together, their differences put aside in the face of the greater threat. Elara had been instrumental in uniting humanity's leaders, but it was Jason's voice, the voice of an ordinary man, that began to rally the people. The more he trained, the more he learned, the more he understood. This wasn't just about military tactics or advanced weaponry. It was about unity. It was about fighting for what was right, for what humanity stood for. The night before their first major operation, Jason stood at the edge of the base again, this time with a different sense of purpose. He was no longer the unsure man he had been when Elara first found him. He was ready. The Valerians had armed him with advanced technology and weapons, but it wasn't those that gave him strength. It was the belief that his fight wasn't just for survival, it was for hope, for a future that could still be shaped by compassion and kindness. "Elara, what happens if we fail tomorrow?" Jason asked, his voice steady but filled with a quiet tension. Elara turned to face him, her eyes filled with an unwavering resolve. "We will not fail, Jason. We may not win every battle, but we will never stop fighting. And as long as we fight, there is always hope." The first wave of attacks came at dawn. The sky was a bruised purple, with the faintest hint of sunlight breaking through the clouds. It was a small victory, a sign that something greater was coming. Jason stood at the front of the line with Elara and the others, a mix of soldiers, civilians, and Valerians, all standing together in the face of what seemed like impossible odds. His hands trembled slightly, but he kept his focus, knowing that every decision he made now could change everything. The alien ships appeared in the sky, dark shapes against the lightening horizon. They moved with terrifying speed, their massive forms casting long shadows over the earth. Jason's heart pounded in his chest as the first blasts of energy from the attraction ships collided with the ground below. The earth shook beneath him, and the air crackled with the intensity of the battle. "We've trained for this moment." Elara's voice came through his communicator. "Stay focused, Jason. We fight for the future." Jason nodded, gripping his weapon tightly. The sound of the battlefield was deafening. Explosions rang out around him, the distant cries of soldiers blending with the roar of the alien ships above. He couldn't see much through the smoke and dust, but he could feel it, an energy in the air, the electric buzz of a battle that was more than just about survival. It was about something deeper. It was about proving that humanity wasn't just a species to be conquered. They were a force that could fight back against the darkness. "Move, now." Elara's voice rang out again, cutting through the chaos. Jason's training kicked in, and he moved swiftly, keeping his eyes focused on his targets. He wasn't just fighting for survival now. He was fighting to protect everything he loved, to protect the future. The Attractions were ruthless. Their weapons were advanced, their ships nearly indestructible, but the one thing they didn't understand was the power of human unity. As the battle raged on, Jason felt the strength of the resistance growing. The people of Earth, people like him, fought side by side, refusing to give up, refusing to let fear win. Jason's heart pounded as he fought, but there was something new now, something he hadn't expected. Hope. It wasn't just a fleeting feeling. It was a force. The more the humans fought, The more they resisted, the stronger that hope became. They weren't fighting just to survive. They were fighting for a future that was worth saving. As the battle raged on, Jason knew this was just the beginning. There would be more fights to come, more battles to win. But for the first time, he didn't feel like he was fighting alone. Earth wasn't just a planet, it was a family. And together, they would stand strong against the darkness. The final choice. The battle for Earth had raged for weeks, each day blending into the next, each skirmish harder than the last. Jason had fought on the front lines alongside soldiers, Valerians, and civilians alike. What had started as uncertainty and fear had slowly transformed into something he hadn't expected: strength. Every day, he saw it in the eyes of his fellow fighters. The unbreakable will to protect their world, to protect their future. And with each victory, no matter how small, that hope grew, spreading like wildfire. Cutting through the darkness, the attractions tried to cast over them. But now, Jason stood at the edge of the battlefield once more, the sky above him churning with dark clouds. This time, it wasn't just a fight for survival. This time, it was the final stand. The attractions had launched their last, all-out assault on Earth's defenses. Their warships blotted out the sun, their weapons casting a long, ominous shadow across the planet. It wasn't just about firepower anymore. It was about breaking their spirit once and for all. And at the heart of it all, Jason knew, stood Vrex, the leader who had orchestrated this devastation, the one who had tried to extinguish humanity's flame. Ilara stood beside him, her face etched with the weight of what was about to happen. "This is it, Jason," she said, her voice barely audible over the noise of the battle. "The attractions have one last weapon, and we know where it's hidden. If we don't stop it, everything we've fought for, everything we've sacrificed, will be for nothing." Jason looked at her, the weight of the moment pressing down on his chest. His heart raced. He had been to the edge of what he thought was possible. But this was different. The endgame. The final chance to save his world. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized something. This wasn't just about defeating the attractions or even stopping their weapon. It was about something deeper. Something he had learned throughout this journey, in every moment of struggle, in every act of kindness, in every battle fought. Not with weapons, but with the strength of the human heart. "What is this weapon?" Jason asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his chest. "It's called the core," Ilara explained, her eyes locked on the horizon. "It's a device capable of draining all the energy from a planet. Its very life force. The attractions used it to wipe out my home, and now they intend to use it on Earth." Jason's stomach clenched. The thought of losing everything, the people, the planet, the future, was too much to bear. "So we stop it. But how do we get to it?" "There is only one way," Ilara said, her voice filled with both conviction and sorrow. "We have to infiltrate their main stronghold. You will have to get past Vrex, face him, and destroy the core. It will be dangerous, Jason, more than anything we've faced so far." Jason looked at her, his mind spinning. He had faced countless dangers already. But this was different. The stakes were higher, the risks greater. It wasn't just about survival now. It was about making a choice that would define the future of Earth. Ilara took a deep breath and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to do this alone. The Valerians, the humans who have stood with you, they will fight by your side. But the final choice, the final sacrifice, is yours. Only you can destroy the core." Jason's heart pounded in his chest. This was the moment he had feared, the moment where everything came to a head. He had been trained, prepared, but this was no longer about strategy or tactics. It was about something he had learned over these long weeks of fighting: the power of the human spirit. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing on him, but he also felt something else. Something stronger than the fear, stronger than the doubt. He felt the weight of the world, not as a burden, but as a call to action. To protect the people he loved, to fight for a future, to show that humanity could stand up against the darkness. "I'll do it," Jason said, his voice calm, unwavering. "I'll destroy the core. I'll face Vrex." Ilara nodded, her expression filled with respect. "I knew you would. You've already proven more than anyone could have imagined, Jason. Now go. Do what you must." Jason stepped forward, his heart full of resolve. This was no longer about fighting for survival. It was about fighting for something far greater, something that could never be taken away. Hope. Humanity's hope. The path to the Attraction stronghold was treacherous. It wasn't just the enemy forces they had to face, but the looming presence of Vrex himself, an enemy who had seen the worst in the galaxy and sought to spread that darkness across Earth. The closer they got to the heart of the stronghold, the more Jason felt the pull of fear, but it was different now. It was a quiet fear, one that he had learned to carry with him, not run from. And then they were there. The core stood before him, its alien design pulsing with raw, menacing energy. Vrex stood at the center, waiting. His eyes were cold, calculating, the darkness of his soul reflected in his unyielding stare. "Jason." Vrex's voice was as cold as ice. "You have no idea what you're up against. This world is already mine. You can't stop it. You can't stop me." Jason took a step forward, his heart pounding but steady. He knew what he had to do. The fate of Earth depended on this moment. "I'm not here to stop you, Vrex," Jason said, his voice cutting through the tension. "I'm here to remind you that no matter how hard you try, you can never take away humanity's will to fight, and you'll never take away hope." The final battle was fierce, but Jason's resolve was unshakable. With one last effort, he activated the device Ilara had given him, the key to destroying the core. The energy pulsed through him, and for a brief moment, he felt the weight of the universe itself pressing down. But with a single push, he sent the core into a cascade of destruction, the power of the Attraction's weapon unraveling in an instant. As the core exploded, Jason felt a rush of relief, a sense that something larger than him had been achieved. The darkness was gone. Earth was saved. Vrex's defeat was inevitable. The Attractions had underestimated the strength of humanity's spirit, the one thing they could never conquer. Jason looked at the sky, a sense of peace settling over him. The battle had been won, but the real victory had been the choice he made. He had chosen to fight for the future, not with weapons, but with the heart of what it meant to be human. And as the dust of battle settled, Jason knew one thing for sure. The story of humanity's triumph had only just begun.